If you served in the U.S. Marine Corps, you've probably seen this picture or heard his story, because he is the only U.S. Coast Guardsman enshrined at the Wall of Heroes of the National Museum of the Marine Corps, and here's why. His name is Douglas Albert Munro. He was born October 11, 1919 in Vancouver, British Columbia, but he grew up in the small railroad town of South Cleveland, Washington. It was the kind of town where everyone knew your name and where hard work wasn't optional. Doug was athletic, musical, and quiet, but also dependable. The type of young man who didn't chase attention, but you knew you could count on. When Europe began sliding toward war in 1939, most Americans were watching from a distance. Doug was. At just 19 years old, he made a decision that would define his life. He enlisted in the United States Coast Guard. He enlisted on September 18, 1939, and at the time, the Coast Guard wasn't front page news, it wasn't flashy, but it was critical. Doug trained as a signalman. He learned how to communications, navigation, and small boat operations. He became highly skilled at handling landing craft in rough waters. When the United States officially entered World War II after Pearl Harbor, the Coast Guard was folded into the Navy, and soon Doug would find himself in the most brutal fight of the Pacific War. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. It's August 1942, Solomon Islands. The battle for Guadalcanal begins. If Japan held these islands, they could threaten Australia and dominate the Pacific supply lines. The American Marines landed and immediately faced jungle warfare, disease, starvation, and relentless attacks. The Coast Guard's job? Get the Marines in and get them out. Doug Munro was placed in charge of a group of Higgins boats, wooden land craft used to ferry troops to shore. Lightly armored and lightly armed, and often the only lifeline between the beach and safety. Now, on September 27th, a battalion of Marines was sent near the Matanikau River at Point Cruz, and if I messed that up, I apologize. What they didn't expect, however, was heavy Japanese resistance. Machine guns opened door, mortars failed, and the Marines were pinned down and in danger of being cut off completely. They needed evacuation immediately. Munro volunteered to lead the rescue. Under heavy fire, he followed his Higgins boats toward shore. Trip after trip, he loaded wounded and exhausted Marines and got them off the beach. Bullets were tearing through the wood on the boat, and the boats were exposed. And on the final withdrawal, Doug made a decision. He positioned his boat between the enemy guns and the remaining Marines, using himself as a shield. He stood at the helm, directing the evacuation, fully exposed to Japanese fire, and he was hit. But he stayed upright long enough to make sure the boats pulled away safely. And as he lay there dying, he asked only one thing. Did they get off? And they did. Nearly 500 Marines survived that evacuation. And for his actions that day, Douglas Albert Munro was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor in May 1943. He remains, still to this day, the only Coast Guardsman ever to receive it. Ships bear his name, along with buildings, but more importantly, the Marines he saved carried his story home. He was only 22 years old. History isn't just made by generals, which I've said plenty of times, but sometimes it's made by a young man in a wooden boat who refuses to leave his brothers behind. Douglas Munro didn't live long enough to see the war end, but because of him, hundreds of Marines did. And that's what the Medal of Honor represents: courage, sacrifice, and choosing others over yourself, even when the bullets are coming right at you. And that is the story of a true American hero who paid the ultimate price for our freedom. But like everyone who has served, I'm sure they were proud, and he was proud, to take the stand against the enemies of the United States. So let's not forget his name to time: Douglas Munro. Like and subscribe for more forgotten history and Medal of Honor recipients' heroic stories with majesty. I'll see y'all next time.